Namaskar and good evening to one and all who are joining us from all over Namibia. Welcome to this special Facebook Live and YouTube Live session. I am Vipul Bawa from the Indian High Commission in Windhoek. As part of the 150th birth anniversary commemorations of Mahatma Gandhi, the High Commission has been organizing several events in the past 2 years. In the run-up to the grand finale of the commemorations next Friday on 2nd October, which is the birthday of Mahatma Gandhi and is marked as the UN International Day of Non-Violence, we bring to you a Gandhi Katha. Katha is the Hindi word for story. This story of Mahatma Gandhi will be narrated by Dr. Shobhana Radhakrishna, who is joining us live from India today. Dr. Shobhana Radhakrishna is globally renowned Gandhian, recognized for her invaluable contribution to literature, social service, and spreading the vision and message of Mahatma Gandhi. Imbibing Gandhiji's values, as she grew up in her ashram in India, her focal point is the Gandhian way of life and serving humanity. We extend a very warm welcome to her. I now call upon the Indian High Commissioner to Namibia, His Excellency Mr. Prashant Agrawal, to share his thoughts on the occasion. Sir, if I could request you to please unmute yourself.
Thank you, Vipul, and namaskar once again. A very warm welcome to all the viewers and listeners who are joining us today for this very special program from Namibia, from India, and indeed elsewhere and all over the world, as we commemorate the conclusion and the concluding events of the 150th birth anniversary of Mahatma Gandhi. We are doing it in a very special way with renowned Gandhian scholar, Dr. Shobhana Radhakrishna. Shobhana ji, a very warm welcome to you and many thanks for joining us live from India today. Shobhana ji is, of course, globally renowned for her scholarship and as a very eminent narrator of Gandhi Katha. But what struck me, Shobhana ji, was that you actually grew up on Sevagram and you must be living every day Gandhian ideals and values as you grew up. And so you would have imbibed all that he had to offer. Sitting in Namibia, of course, we are not very far from the Tolstoy farm and South Africa, where the process of transformation of a young Mohandas into Mahatma Gandhi actually began. Now, Gandhian way of life, as we all know, is a complete way in itself. His teachings are there to influence and inspire all our thoughts and action. But I would say that service not just to humanity, but to Mother Nature, to environment, to all living beings, was something very integral to his message. And as part of that message, we have in Namibia, in collaboration with Namibian authorities, have been undertaking a number of service-oriented initiatives. Shobhana ji, I would be happy to inform you that we organized a Jaipur foot camp under which a lot of needy people ranging from children to elderly were provided free prosthetic limbs that enabled them to walk. Hundreds of trees have been planted by the university students and school going children all over Namibia. And as these trees grow, they spread the message of environment protection around. In coming days, again, hundreds of school children will be learning through such initiatives how to grow their own food and vegetable and connect to the nature. They will be learning how to use solar lanterns and use sustainable energy to illuminate their lives. So there are a number of such initiatives happening in Namibia. And last year on 2nd October, we had the honor of having the father of Namibian nation, Dr. Sam Nujoma, uh, deliver the prestigious Thuban Guriereb lecture on 2nd October. And he, with other Namibian dignitaries, had very glowing words about Gandhiji's own contribution as inspiration to their freedom struggle. His action against colonialism, against apartheid, and the inequality inspired not only the Namibian freedom struggle, but a lot of freedom struggles across the world. Gandhiji, of course, used to say that my life is my message. And I think in that simple sentence lies an enormity of his life. So with those words, I will pass on the baton to you, Shobhana ji, to convey his life, and I'm sure there would be a lot of messages in for all of us in that life. So over to you, and thank you once again for giving us this opportunity to hear Gandhi Katha from you. Thank you.
Thank you, High Commissioner, His Excellency Shri Prashant Agrawal ji, for your kind message. Namaskar and welcome to the Gandhi Katha, story of Mahatma Gandhi, narrated by me during the commemoration of the 150th birth anniversary of Mahatma Gandhi, which incidentally is also the 150th birth anniversary of Kasturba Gandhi, his wife. Kasturba Gandhi's suffering, sacrifice, and contribution into making Mohan into the Mahatma and inspiring thousands of women to fight against injustice and racial discrimination in South Africa and in the Indian freedom struggle is extraordinary. I express my deep gratitude to the High Commission of India in Namibia for hosting the Gandhi Katha amidst these challenging times to learn from Gandhiji's philosophy of truth, non-violence, and purity of means, his spirituality, his environmental credo, and his practices of health and wellness of body, mind, and spirit for coping up and staying safe physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually during and after the coronavirus COVID 19 pandemic, which has affected the entire humanity. On October 2nd, the world celebrates the UN International Day of Nonviolence, and in India, we celebrate Mahatma Gandhi's birth anniversary as Gandhi Jayanthi. The entire world is remembering Mahatma Gandhi, the apostle of peace and nonviolence. We have an opportunity to remind the humanity of the efficacy of the messages of Mahatma Gandhi, the father of our nation. I pay my respects to the leading lights of Namibia and convey my warm wishes to the Namibians and the Indian community who have joined me online today. Historically, India and Namibia share a very close and cordial relation. The bonds of friendship between Namibia and India remain strong for the future generation. The relationship between the people of India and Namibia date back to their time of the bitter struggle for freedom, independence, and sovereignty, and have been deeply rooted in the history and works of the movements of non-aligned member states. Dr. Sam Nujoma, founding president of the Republic of Namibia, wrote in Gandhi Anthology, published in 2019, and I quote, Namibia is a country that gained freedom and genuine independence through international solidarity and expresses warm appreciation for the role played by Gandhi for laying a strong foundation in the fight against apartheid and the white South African supremacist ideology and its demise. Indeed, Mahatma Gandhi was a towering figure and a struggle giant who inspired freedom fighters the world over. Gandhiji's courageous stand overlapped with the Southwest Africans' fight for freedom and Namibian independence. The non-violent civil disobedience by Gandhiji in South Africa and then in the Indian freedom struggle was an inspiration and guiding spirit for the Namibian freedom struggle than for many other countries. Gandhiji had begun his protest journey in South Africa, making an indelible mark on the times and the world history. Many great African countries, such as South Africa, Tanzania, Zimbabwe, Namibia, Zambia, Kenya, and Ghana, got freedom from European colonial regimes after a long struggle and freedom movement which followed the path shown by Gandhiji. Gandhian ways had steeped deeply among them and percolated down to the people in the African countries, which attained freedom by following the steps of Mahatma Gandhi. Gandhiji drew inspiration not only from his experience in South Africa, but also from the reading of the history of Africa as a whole. Thus, we observe that during the entire non-violent freedom struggle of Mahatma Gandhi in India, Africa was dominant in his mind as his early struggle for equality was initiated in Africa. Gandhi Katha is based on the ancient Indian oral tradition of Katha or storytelling with hymns and narration. I have given talks in Gandhi Katha in 98 countries hosted by the Indian missions. In all the countries, people have great reverence and respect for Mahatma Gandhi. Many have been inspired by him to take up the cudgels against injustice through non-violence. Others have followed his environmental credo, and still others have been deeply touched by his simple spiritual life. The new generation is eager to understand more about the greatest man of the last century who made such a huge impact on humanity and inspired many world leaders. Millions of people have been inspired by Gandhiji in the past and in the present. Madiba, Nelson Mandela, who was often dubbed as the Gandhi of South Africa, had strong Indian connections and striking similarities with India's father of the nation. The anti apartheid icon, Madiba had said, and I quote, "The Mahatma is an integral part of our history because it is here that he first experimented with truth. Here that he demonstrated his characteristic firmness in pursuit of justice. Here that he developed satyagraha as a philosophy and a method of struggle." Mahatma Gandhi used to start and end his day with prayers. And these were prayers from all the religions of the world, Sarva Dharma Prarthana. In the ashram, every activity and program used to begin and end with prayers. Gandhiji's internal core comprised of the essence of all the religions, one that he had acquired from long study and reflection. The devotional poetry of the saint poets that he had heard, sung, and absorbed since childhood made up a significant part of the life of his soul. He said that ultimately all the religions point to the same truth of compassion, love, forgiveness, and tolerance, and that everyone must study the essence of all the religions in an attitude of perfect reverence and must have friendship and respect for the practitioners of different religions and diverse cultures. All of Gandhiji's friends were from different religions and cultural background from around the world, and he actively encouraged friendship across religions. One of Mahatma Gandhi's legacies to the world is nonviolent conflict resolution through interfaith dialogues for establishing brotherhood, unity, and harmony. Even after 7 decades have passed since Gandhiji passed on, but in every part of the world, his relevance is felt as strongly as ever before, and his visions and actions are of an enduring significance for all times and places. His approach to life was holistic and cannot be divided into watertight compartments of social, religious, political, public, or personal life. Gandhiji stands out as the champion not only of political democracy but also of economic and spiritual democracy in today's world. Gandhiji believed that moral degeneration is the root cause of all evils, including conflicts. This explains his lifelong crusade of attainment of moral values such as truthfulness, nonviolence, purity of means, love, self control, fearlessness, forgiveness, friendliness, compassion, mercy, and so on. For Gandhiji, the principle of satyagraha or non-violent resistance and civil disobedience was by non-cooperation with evil through the moral values of love force, truth force, soul force, sacrifice, and self-suffering. For him, the consideration for the sufferings of other fellow human beings was of paramount importance. His belief and actions were that social change for establishing justice and dignity of humans is both less harmful and more sustainable when achieved by nonviolent means. His legacy of satyagraha is widely recognized and practiced the world over and seen in many movements for civil rights nowadays. Gandhiji's environmental practices or environmental credo was based on conservation of natural resources, which were often misused and overused for the sake of development. Gandhiji had warned about the unsustainability on the global scale a century ago. He had said that greed will be the main reason for the environment degradation and the ecological crisis, and famously declared that the earth has enough for man's needs, but not for man's greed. Further, he had also said that the earth, the air, the land, and the water are not an inheritance from our forefathers, but on loan from our children. So we have to hand it over to them as it was handed over to us. Equality for women within the society was a principle Gandhiji passionately believed in. His vision of Sarvodaya, the welfare of all, becomes very relevant in the crisis of internally displaced people and migrants. He may well have kept in mind the very basic unit of human organization, a village or a county. His vision of Gram Swaraj, which is self reliant, independent, self governed village, is built on the premises of sustainable growth, and that is the need of the hour. I would like to tell you that in the ashram, in the morning and evening prayers, the first verse from the Ishopanishad, the shortest Upanishad from the Indian tradition used to be recited, and it said, Isha Vasyamidam Sarvam Yat Kincha Jagatyan Jagat Tena Tyaktena Bhunjitha Ma Gridha Kasya Svidhanam. And the same thought, which is, according to Gandhiji, renounce and rejoice is the essence of Indian civilization. And that same thought is expressed in the Gandhi Katha hymn, which I will play now. According to my understanding, Mahatma Gandhi's life was an epic of faith and endeavor. His faith was in truth, the ultimate reality of truth, and he endeavored to attain it through non-violence throughout his life, till the very last breath. Gandhiji's adherence to truth, non-violence, and purity of means has inspired me to give Gandhi Katha, so that people can put their hearts into understanding Gandhiji, get inspired to learn from his extraordinary ethical and moral leadership, his simple spiritual life, revolutionary thoughts, actions, his lifelong service to humanity against all forms of injustice, and how he continues to inspire people in all the parts of the globe, at all times and in all ages. Perhaps the greatest source of strength for Mahatma Gandhi was in his faith in God. Truth was the deepest and the most complete form of God. The faith gave him the constant awareness that he was to be nothing but an instrument in his hands. He was to go wherever he was led. For him, the guidance of God constituted two things. One, he had to walk on the path enlightened by truth that was available to him in whatever measures and form. On that path, hundreds of world teachers had already walked before him. Two, he had to constantly gaze inwards and find inspiration through self introspection, self examination, and self purification. This he did by repeated questioning, and that question was, Ko aham? Who am I? What am I? And what is the purpose of my life? The question has been asked in our ancient Indian civilization since the past 5,000 years. The answer came to Gandhiji that the real purpose of life was to serve others. The deeper the faith, the greater was the endeavor for Mahatma Gandhi. He said, Truth is God. Satya hi Parmeshwar hai. Faith in truth led Mahatma Gandhi to two other realizations. If God is omnipresent, then truth is omnipresent too. If each human being were an aspect of God, that then each person is capable of being truthful, of being good, and doing good to others. The second realization was that in spite of all the upheavals in the history of humankind, humanity will only progress in an auspicious direction because truth, that is God, is only interested in the welfare of its creation. His endeavor throughout his life was devoted to that search of that element of truth, to awaken it and to nurture it. This is why he could feel oneness with everyone. For most of us, this realization does not set in easily. But because of this understanding of oneness, Gandhiji had no enemies. He did not want to settle any scores with anyone, and he did not want to take any revenge. He merely wanted to extend his love, compassion, and respect to everyone, and that was his main trait. He respected individuals as individuals without attaching any label, and that was another trait that we see in him. Another trait, which is a very important trait that we see in him, was that he remained ever positive and optimistic. There were many upheavals and challenges that he faced, but under all the situations, he kept his balance of mind, peace of mind, and remained forever positive. Romeo Rolla, the famous French writer and pacifist who won the Nobel Prize for Literature, wrote the biography of Mahatma Gandhi in 1924, and that brought Gandhiji to the notice of the Western world. In 1931, on his way back from the Second Round Table Conference in London, Gandhiji went to Switzerland and spent 5 days in Windhoek and discussed the crisis of civilization with Romeo Rolla. Later on, Romeo Rolla wrote, and I quote, "This little man is so fragile in appearance, is tireless, and fatigue is a word that does not exist in his vocabulary. He could calmly answer for hours without a muscle of face twitching. His mind proceeds through successive experiments into action, and he follows a straight line, but he never stops." I will play a Gandhi Katha dhun in Hindi. The hymn elaborates on Gandhiji's definition of truth as having harmony between thought, word, and deed.
मन वाणी कर्म में सत्य ही तू बोल, मन वाणी कर्म में सत्य ही तू बोल, जीवन में मंगल के द्वार दे तू खोल, जीवन में मंगल के द्वार दे तू खोल, ज्ञान कर्म भक्ति का हो सम्यक विधान, ज्ञान कर्म भक्ति का हो सम्यक विधान, सुंदर का सुमधुर होगा, सत्य शिव सुंदर का सुमधुर होगा, मन वाणी कर्म में सत्य ही तू बोल, मन वाणी कर्म में सत्य ही तू बोल, जीवन में मंगल के द्वार दे तू खोल, जीवन में मंगल के द्वार दे तू खोल, ज्ञान कर्म भक्ति का हो सम्यक विधान, ज्ञान कर्म भक्ति का हो सम्यक विधान, सत्य शिव सुंदर का सुमधुर होगा, सत्य शिव सुंदर का सुमधुर होगा।
Mahatma Gandhi is the greatest apostle of peace the world has seen in the recent past. His notion of peace is focused on tolerance, forgiveness, compassion, oneness, truth force, love force, and soul force through self-suffering and sacrifice to melt the hearts of the hardest of adversaries. Albert Einstein, the greatest scientist of the first half of the 20th century, had called Mahatma Gandhi as the supreme practical leader for change. And listen into his voice.
I believe that Gandhi's views were the most enlightened of all the political men in our time. We should strive to do things in his spirit, not to use violence in fighting for our cause, but by non-participation in anything you believe is evil.
Gandhiji was the conscience keeper of humanity. That his ideas will be an inspiration to us, both as individuals and as a society, is beyond any doubt. He was an epoch maker, one who could sow the seeds for the next generation from the fruits of the previous one. Mahatma Gandhi is the most powerful visionary and a practical idealist from the first half of the last century, whose life is a role model for us all. But the effort has to begin from the point where you're standing. That is what made all Mahatma Gandhi's idealist actions practical. And he can be truly called a man of action. But it does not only mean that he was very busy. What we mean is the action of putting ideas or beliefs into practice more than anything else was the driving force in his life. The answer for Mahatma Gandhi was always found in action. He had said, an ounce of practice is worth more than tons of preaching. But if you want to understand Gandhiji, you will have to understand him not only with the intellect, but also from the emotional part of you and from acts from his life. Usually, people see him from different perspectives, and some people will think of Gandhiji mostly as a politician, but at the same time, there are others who think of him as a saint, and there are still others who will think of Gandhiji as a nation builder. He may be all this, but I think when we consider Gandhiji, we have to try to find out what is the common stream in all these different aspects of life that you see in his personality. One was the commitment to values, and the second one was efficiency in the kind of work that he did. This is part of his comprehensiveness, and there was a unique blend, for example, of enthusiasm on one hand and patience on the other. Mahatma Gandhi has made significant and seminal contributions that span across such disciplines such as environment, economics, spirituality, conflict resolution, international faith, reforms, civil rights, education, politics, society, and many, many more. At that time, the most harmful and destructive impact on the world was that of imperialism, violence, war, materialism, and the greed for controlling the world. Mahatma Gandhi advised to shun these seven social sins in his speech on October 22nd, 1925. Politics without principle, wealth without work, commerce without ethics, knowledge without character, pleasure without conscience, science without morality, and worship without sacrifice. In my opinion, Mahatma Gandhi's life left the most powerful and strong imprint on the humanity of the world. He had said, my life is my message. And who can say so confidently? Only a person who is very, very sure about his conduct, character, can say these words. John Haynes Holmes was a pacifist, an anti war activist, and the founder of American Civil Liberties Union. He had met him in London in 1931 and later on he came to India in 1947 respectively. He found Mahatma Gandhi's presence, those bright eyes shining through his spectacles, his voice so clear and yet so gentle, his whole presence so simple and yet so strong. He said, and I quote, I believe that he is unquestionably the greatest man living in the world today. When I think of Gandhi, I think of Jesus Christ. I will play the Gandhi Katha dhun or hymn in Hindi about Gandhiji's philosophy of truth, non-violence, and purity of means that combined together in
अहिंसा से सत्याग्रह सीखा, सत्य अहिंसा से सत्याग्रह सीखा, सर्व प्रकार के भय का मोचन, सर्व प्रकार के भय का मोचन, सत्य अहिंसा में मन मेरा मगन, लागे लगन, सत्य अहिंसा में मन मेरा मगन, सत्य अहिंसा में मन मेरा मगन।
Time magazine had listed out three most important protests over 190 years. The first one was the Boston Tea Party. The second one was the Dandi March or Salt Satyagraha. And the third one was the March of Washington. We can see a common thread. The first and second were against the same company, the East India Company. And there is a common thread of non-violence in all three. In 1930, with a pinch of salt, Mahatma Gandhi shook the world. He started out on 12th March from his Sabarmati ashram in Ahmedabad in Gujarat for Dandi, the seashore town, with 79 fellow marchers. Walked for 24 days, walking 10 miles per day, stopped at 48 villages, gave speeches morning and evening to mobilize people to participate in the non-cooperation movement in the Salt Satyagraha, and covered 241 miles till he reached Dandi seashore on 5th April. In the early hours of the morning of 6th April, when Gandhiji bent down to pick up a fistful of muddy lump of earth with salt, 100,000 people joined him, and towards the end of the Salt Satyagraha, 300,000 people broke the salt law all over India. 1,362 newspapers covered this news worldwide. William Lawrence Shearer, the American journalist, was present during the Salt Satyagraha in the Dharasana salt depot, and his graphic reporting brought the incidents to the notice of the world. The world woke up to the brutality of the British regime and to the power of non-violence and satyagraha. So Mahatma Gandhi remains the most powerful global brand ambassador of ahimsa or non-violence, a youth icon who opposed all forms of injustice, an apostle of peace and non-violence, a man whose values can make the world a better place today. Gandhiji spent his first 18 formative years in India, and the seeds of spirituality were sown in India. The 3 years that he spent in London to study law gave him an opportunity to meet and know the reformers and thinkers of that time. And he also read the books of the Western philosophers and poets, and his vision broadened. And that is the time his interest in religion aroused. And he became a barrister and learned the lessons of citizenship. He spent 20 years in South Africa as a political activist and a social organizer. Satyagraha was born there, and he started his experiments in Satyagraha in South Africa. In 1904, in South Africa, after reading John Ruskin's book Unto This Last, Barrister Mohandas Gandhi transformed his life overnight and started leading a community life of voluntary poverty, self control, bread labor, and Sarvodaya, the welfare of all. He established four ashrams in his lifetime, two in South Africa called the Phoenix Settlement in 1904 and Tolstoy Farm in 1910, and two ashrams in India, the Sabarmati Ashram in Ahmedabad in Gujarat in 1917 and the Sevagram Ashram in Wardha in Maharashtra in 1936. Here, Kasturba Gandhi, Mahatma Gandhi, and the ashram community lived in poverty like the common villagers of India. Ashrams were his ideal of a non-violent face-to-face society for Sarvodaya, the welfare of all, and carrying out constructive programs, which is his second gift to humanity, the first being Satyagraha. Gandhiji's ashrams had a mingling of political and spiritual aims. It was a practical laboratory for transforming ordinary men and women into extraordinary seekers and satyagrahis, for offering the highest sacrifice of their lives in the freedom struggle on one hand, and to get involved in constructive programs to serve the poorest of the poor by establishing their self respect and dignity. These were the places where Swavalamban, self reliance, Swachhata, cleanliness, Seva, service to humanity, and constructive programs were undergoing for realizing his vision of village republic or Gram Swaraj. I am happy to inform you that I was born in the last ashram in Sevagram in Wardha. My father was inspired by Gandhiji since his childhood and joined the non-violent freedom struggle in India and lived in the Sevagram ashram. Even after Gandhiji passed on in 1948, for more than 5 decades, my parents and all of us have continued to walk on the path that Gandhiji has shown to humanity. So, what I'm telling you is based on what my parents have told me and my own understanding and experience of Gandhiji. The life and thoughts of Mahatma Gandhi were intertwined and inseparable. His politics was imbued with his spiritual experiments, and his spirituality was tempered by his vision of a non-violent society, and his constructive program was integral to his politics. The unique practices of Mahatma Gandhi, his control of palate, his fasts, his spinning, his silence, and his prayers gave him the internal strength and were as much a part of his politics as of his spiritual life. These practices and experiments were sustained and nurtured by the inmates of the ashrams that he had founded. The ashram community, through its own practices, affirmed, modified, and validated Mahatma Gandhi's ideals and practices and continues to do so even till today. This shows the relevance of his practices. Gandhiji carried out all his experiments in health and wellness in the ashrams through nature cure, diet control, fasting, hydrotherapy, sun bath, mud packs, and observing silence for a whole day. Our friend and the British baker, Sir Horace Alexander, stayed in Gandhiji's ashrams in both the ashrams for quite a few years. And he said, he observed that the ashram bell used to ring 56 times during the day. He said, and I quote, Gandhi had wonderful courtesy and punctuality. I was to learn quickly that he was the slave of watch. He had more to do in every 24 hours than almost any other man. So he had learned how to pack the most into every minute. Yet he never gave the impression of being hurried and impatient. Gandhiji has given three gifts to humanity. As I said, the first one is Satyagraha, about which a lot of people know many things, not everything. Constructive programs, about which few people know. And the third one is Ekadasha Vrata, or the 11 observances, about which very few people know, which were a set of rules formulated by Gandhiji for the ashram community for spiritual progress and voluntary self control. The principle behind these Ekadasha Vrata, or the 11 observances, were to do unto others as you want others to do unto you. Ivan Illich, the Croatian Austrian philosopher, had come to Sevagram Ashram in 1980 and spent a week there. Every day he sat in Bapu Kuti, or Gandhiji's cottage, which is which was made up of a very simple structure of bamboo and mud. And he said, and I quote, "This hut of Mahatma Gandhi demonstrates to the world how the dignity of the common man can be brought up. It is also a symbol of happiness, which we can derive from practicing the principles of simplicity, service, and truthfulness." Now I will play the Gandhi Katha hymn in Hindi, which explains Gandhiji's philosophy of Satya hi Parameshwar hai, truth is God.
आंखें पवित्र राख सत्य ही तू बोल, आंखें पवित्र राख सत्य ही तू बोल, ईश्वर साक्षात होंगे अंतर टटोल, ईश्वर साक्षात होंगे अंतर टटोल, सत्य ही है परमेश्वर बापू का बोल, सत्य ही है परमेश्वर बापू का बोल, उसी परमेश्वर की नित्य कर तू शोध, उसी परमेश्वर की नित्य कर तू शोध, आंखें पवित्र राख सत्य ही तू बोल, आंखें पवित्र राख सत्य ही तू बोल, ईश्वर साक्षात होंगे अंतर टटोल, ईश्वर साक्षात होंगे अंतर टटोल, ईश्वर साक्षात होंगे अंतर टटोल.
Though Gandhiji's role and contributions to the political arena are well known, what is less known is his contribution towards health and wellness. Gandhiji was a firm believer in the principle that a healthy mind keeps the body healthy, and he stressed on the importance of a healthy lifestyle and positive thinking. Gandhiji was essentially a man of science. He approached problems in a scientific manner. Mahatma Gandhi's message to the world on the vital question of health and well being is very important. To him, the study of this question was part of the service to God and His creation, which was his mission. Knowing to care summed up his life. His message was very simple and easy to follow. It encouraged everyone to respect simplicity, voluntary self control, reduce the wants, follow the tradition, cultural practices, the values, follow the environmental credo, and treat oneself through nature cure for living in harmony with nature. For Gandhiji, the outside universe was but a reflection of the inside universe. He repeated time and again that the universe is compressed in the atom. There is not one law for the atom and another for the universe. It was based on his actual spiritual experience that gave him the conviction that the moral principles have no meaning unless they can be made to serve as the guide of conduct in the daily affairs of man. The Sanskrit proverb, Yatha Pinde Tatha Brahmande, says that you are the universe within the universe. As with the self, so is the universe. What is going on within you is what is going on in the universe. Dr. Sherwood Eddy was a leading American Protestant missionary, a prolific writer, and an educator who visited Gandhiji in the Sabarmati ashram in 1929 and wrote that Gandhiji's bodily presence is like that of Apostle Paul or Socrates. He wrote, and I quote, "He impressed us as the most childlike, the most transparent, the most lovable of man. His whole character is centered in his unique passion in truth and reality." Very few people know that as a couple, Gandhiji and Kasturba Gandhi contributed immensely 123 years ago to public health emergencies, working as frontline workers in such health outbreaks selflessly and in the service of humanity. In the Spanish influenza pandemic of 1918, Gandhiji opened up his Sabarmati ashram as a quarantine center and treated and served patients through nature cure, provided simple vegetarian diet to boost immunity and maintain physical distancing. Gandhiji and Kasturba Gandhi took care of the families of the patients, looked after their physical, mental, and spiritual needs, gave them correct information, helped them to remain positive through prayer, meditation, and Ramanama, and taking care of each other during the time of the Spanish flu pandemic. On November 1918, on November 10th, 1918, rather, Gandhiji had said, "Our ancestors could build such tough bodies in the past, but today we are reduced to a state of miserable weakness and are easily infected by noxious germs moving about in the air. There is one and only one really effective way by which we can save ourselves from them even in our present broken state of health. That way is the way of self restraint, sanyam, or of imposing a limit on our acts, wants, and desires." In August 1942, Gandhiji wrote the book called Key to Health, which became a very famous book of his, in which he wrote that anyone who observes the rules of health mentioned in this book will find that he has got in it a real key to unlock the gates leading into health. He will not need to knock at the doors of doctors or Vaidyas or the traditional health practitioners from day to day. Today, the world is facing three kinds of crises globally. First is the COVID 19 pandemic, the second is the serious and long drawn financial crisis, and the third one is the ecological crisis, which is impacting everyone. We have to look for answers somewhere within ourselves by learning from the life of Mahatma Gandhi, which is so transparent, so open, so honest, and accessible to everyone. The lesson the pandemic is teaching us is simple. When one member of the family falls sick, the entire family is affected, and soon the community is affected, the nation is affected, and then other communities in other nations in this globalized world. The well being of one individual has an impact on people on the other side of the globe. This is true of every action of ours. What we eat, what we buy, what we think, and what we do has reverberations and repercussions on all life on earth. It is this anubandha, this interconnectedness that sustains all life on earth. We are all in this together as one human family, connected as brothers and sisters. And whether we choose to see it or not, we only have one home, this planet Earth, our Mother Earth. Our ancient sages and seers have always looked upon us as Vishwamanava, global citizen, and said that the world is one family, Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. The current COVID 19 pandemic is a wake up call for every country, big or small, rich or poor, developed or developing. It has opened our eyes to the fragility of the existence of humans. We will have to learn to live with COVID 19 now and in the future as well. Instead of reinventing a new lifestyle, we just have to get inspired from the life of Mahatma Gandhi to make the necessary changes in thought, action, and conduct for coping up physically, mentally, and spiritually. And this is the future that the coronavirus COVID 19 is pointing out to us if we observe carefully. When a crisis makes you feel stressed, meditation, prayer, and chanting relieves the stress response. Fear and anxiety are forms of stress that become exaggerated when events become uncertain, when you feel a loss of control over the situation, and when the stress keeps repeating itself without let up, the thinking mind reacts to it and to all of these conditions. It always has, even in normal times, but a crisis brings stress into high relief, making it very capable of lowering the immune system of our bodies and causing inflammatory diseases. Decades ago, stress was classified as epidemic of modern life. The Gandhian way of life is the best guide to practicing the coping mechanism that induces relaxation, calmness, inner peace, fearlessness, absence of anxiety, and remaining positive. Therefore, Mahatma Gandhi comes across as the greatest healer and the wellness guru who comes free of cost. The Gandhian principles of freedom from fear and care for all is a perfect prescription in the times of crisis. Gandhiji's emphasis on healthy lifestyle, positive thinking, empowerment for self care and care in the community would make perfect sense. I once again take this opportunity to thank the Indian Mission for hosting the Gandhi Katha. My special thanks are to all of you who have joined me online today. I will end with the peace benediction in Sanskrit for the universal welfare. Om Sarve Bhavantu Sukhina Sarve Santu Niramayaha Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu Ma Kaschit Dukha Bhag Bhavet. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Let all be happy, let all be healthy, let all experience auspiciousness, let no one be overwhelmed by grief. Om Peace, peace, peace. With Gandhiji's blessings, who had said that peace is the only positive force which will lead us from darkness towards light. I will end with Gandhi Katha hymn, Shubha Mangal Ho. May they be auspicious good, may they be good, may the earth be auspicious, may the sky be auspicious, may every particle on earth be auspicious.
I see there is some technical issue with Dr. Nikhila's connection. Uh, I would take this opportunity to propose a formal vote of thanks on behalf of the Indian High Commission in Namibia. Thank you so much, Dr. Shobhana Radhakrishna.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Shobhana Radhakrishna, for your very thought-provoking talk, putting Gandhiji's messages in a new viewpoint and also stressing the healthy mind and healthy body in relation to positive thinking. I would also like to thank Dr. Ravi Chopra ji for coordinating and arranging all the requirements for the live webinar. I'd also like to thank our High Commissioner, His Excellency, Mr. Prashant Agarwal, Head of Chancery, Mr. Vipul Bawa, for their contribution and guidance, and to all the listeners of Namibia who joined us for the event. Thank you very much.